أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Inshallah, we will continue our discussion on the Seerah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa ali. Yesterday we began our discussion on the era of Jahiliyyah. We gave a little bit of an introduction, and there are some points and discussions remaining from that era of Jahiliyyah, which we will continue today. And then from tomorrow's lesson, we will begin with the actual story of the birth of the Holy Prophet, and we won't go into so much details, and we'll go from there straight to the actual marriage of the Prophet, and we'll skip some of the major events that took place, otherwise it takes too long. Continuing our discussion from yesterday, we spoke about this idea of idol worship, and we said that one of the key sort of elements that comprise the Jahiliyyah era was this notion of idol worship. That was their religious system, that was their worldview. They believed that you have these idols who are basically the arbab, they are little mini Rabbs. Allah is the Khaliq, He has created these Rabbs and He has delegated everything to these Rabbs independently, and they are the ones you are supposed to show your ubudiyah towards. You are supposed to show your servitude towards these Rabbs, these idols. And then, we talked about some of the reasons for why. How could it be that a place where the Kaaba was there, Ibrahim alayhi salam made the Kaaba, how can it go from a place of Tawheed to having 350, 360 idols inside this sacred vicinity? How could that happen? And we talked about the story of a person by the name of Amr bin Luhay al-Khuza'i. He was from Bani Khuza'a. Bani Khuza'a was the tribe that would rule over Makkah at that time. This is before Quraysh would rule over. And Bani Khuza'a, this Amr had gone and seen this nomadic tribe in Sham, and he was impressed by them. He brought back their idol, and then the idol worshipping became common in Mecca. And we said that, look, Amr made a logical fallacy here, where he attributes the success of the Amalik to their worship of Hubal. Hubal was the idol. And on top of that, he was also the tribal leader, the chief of the tribe of Khuza'a, and the masses, they were impressed by him. They considered him to be an authority, and they readily accepted it. And thirdly, there was also a huge gap between Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and the Meccan society. So there was obviously a huge gap, and there is ignorance as well in society. And it was very easily, it was very easy for Amr to basically superimpose this entire new way of worshipping in Mecca. This obviously has a lot of lessons for us, and I alluded to one of them yesterday, where I said that we should be careful in attributing success of certain civilizations or certain groups to their religious beliefs. There may not be any necessary connection between these two things. You may want to investigate and research into that, whether a religious belief has a necessary relationship to the success of that civilization, and that also assumes the definition of what success is. For example, when we look at Western societies, oftentimes we say they're very successful, they're progressing, and we are defining this success by, for example, technological developments or organization, how the governments are organized or how society is organized. It does not necessarily mean that this is due to their lack of belief in God. That if we also stop believing in God, then we will also become successful like them. There's no necessary relationship between these two things. Okay, so on the contrary, if you want to look at that, you may also want to consider the negative sides of the lack of belief in God as well. Even there are atheist scholars, or atheist philosophers, who at the very least will say religion is good for pragmatic reasons. At least it keeps people in shape and in tune. Even they will acknowledge some pragmatic value to religion. So, and when you don't have that, it's a lot of room, or it's a slippery slope essentially. Lack of belief in religion or God is a slippery slope. I'm saying even some atheist philosophers will acknowledge that. Okay, so this is just a recap from yesterday. Now we want to talk about a second key element in Arabia, and that is the tribal conventions. Okay, what do I mean by convention? Maybe some of the audience that is new. Convention. Look, in any society, in any jami' that exists, jama'ah, we work based off of conventions. Okay, for example, I I own this book, for example. Ownership is nothing physical outside. It's just a physical book and it's just me. Okay? But if I'm holding this in my hand and somebody comes and snatches this from me, people will say this person stole Ali Imran's book. Why would you say he stole my book? Because society has a convention called, ownership, that when somebody is holding something and they're possessing it, there's this idea that there is a relationship between myself and the book, and we are going to call that ownership. It's in the mind, actually. It's called a construct. But these constructs or conventions are going to regulate how you behave in society. Okay? Ownership, marriage, divorce, a lot of these contracts, for example, most of these things have to do with conventions. This is how society operates. Likewise, in Arabia, they also had conventions. Okay, how society is operating, how they're functioning, how they are, moving about, how they're, migrating, how they're doing their trade, their business. All of these things also have some protocols. They have some rules. There's a very interesting book in Arabic. It's called Al-Mufassal fi Tarikh al-Arab qabla al-Islam. A detailed exposition on the Arab society before Islam. It's like 8 volumes. It goes into fiqh al-jahiliyyah, the fiqh of these jahil people. Like, what did they have? How did they get married? How did they do, contracts? How did their judge system work, for example? What was a hakim or a hakam? For example, hakim, today we say hakim means a ruler. Hakim before the Ottoman Empire did not mean ruler in Arabic. It was just a judge and does not have any enforcement value. You cannot enforce anything. He just gives an arbitration and up to you guys to follow. This hakam system was very important as well. Okay, anyways, these are all conventions that they had as well. One of the key conventions that they had was the convention that basically dealt with the tribal system. How was the tribes working? I'm going to give a little bit of explanation, then I'll come on the board and I'll draw some of those things out. Look, in Arabia, the religious authority, if you want to call it religious authority, or the epistemic authority, the justification for your belief system and your action, what is pushing you to do things? Okay, for example, what pushes a Muslim to do things? For example, hope of heaven, hope of reward, that pushes us to do something. That's a driving factor. Or for example, fear of punishment, fear of hellfire, that pushes us, or towards an act or away from an act. Or for example, just our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that pushes us, it's a driving factor, driving force that pushes us to do things. In Arabian society, the thing that pushes people to do something or not do something is actually the tribe. What is my tribe saying? What is the leader of my tribe doing? And essentially, how some scholars have described this phenomenon is basically they've described it as tribal humanism. Humanism is a prominent ideology where everything is about you the human. You are the measure of all things. You are the measure of truth. You are the criterion for truth. Whatever I say, that is it. I don't want anybody imposing anything on me. I will be the one imposing things on other people. As long as whatever maximizes my pleasure, that's all it is. Everybody knows what humanism is. In that society, what they have is a form of tribal humanism. Whatever my tribe says, that is what's going to basically going to have the truth. Look at this poem, one line by a person named Durayd. Durayd, this is a pre-Islamic poet. He says, وَمَا أَنَا إِلَّا مِنْ غَزِيَّةَ إِنْ غَوَتْ غَوَيْتُ وَإِنْ تَرْشُدُ غَزِيَّةُ أَرْشُدِي. He says, Ghaziyya is the name of his clan. Okay, he says, I am from Ghaziyya. وَمَا أَنَا إِلَّا مِنْ غَزِيَّةٍ. I am from this tribe, this clan called Ghaziyya. In Ghawat, if Ghaziyya goes on error, Ghawaitu, I will also go on error. And this is why Allah says in the Quran, if I recall, it's in the Quran that, if, they say that we follow our ancestors, we follow our tribe. And Allah says, if they were on the wrong, would you follow them in their error? They did. They would do that. Very similar to when somebody says, if the person you like tells you to jump off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff? We say no, we will not jump off the cliff because our aql is telling us don't do that. But these people are saying no. If our tribe goes in the error, we will go with them in error. And if they have rushd, if they go towards guidance, then I will also go towards guidance. So you see, the truth is with the tribe. Wherever they go, we're going to go with them. And many times, so look, he's acknowledging that I understand my tribe can go wrong. The poet is acknowledging that yes, my tribe can sometimes go off the path, but it's regardless of that, what I'm going to do is essentially whatever my tribe does. Now I'm going to basically draw out the system actually of the clans and tribes. And the reason why I'm drawing this out is because this is going to become important for some of the other lessons. For example, the lessons that have to do with the epistemic attacks, the lesson that has to do with when the Prophet is boycotted, when the Prophet goes to Ta'if, even the hijrah to Abyssinia. Once you understand this, you will understand many of those discussions as well. Okay, what do we want to say here? We say, look, Arabia has a tribal system. Tribe, for example, the biggest tribe is, or one of the biggest tribe is Quraysh. Okay, everybody knows Quraysh. But they had other tribes as well, for example, Hawazin, that they will fight with, later on. So you have a tribe, you have a khandan, basically. Within Quraysh, you have clans. So for example, you have the Bani Hashim, you have Masalan Bani Makhzum, you have Bani Muttalib, and so on, Bani Umayyah, and so on. There's so many clans, okay? And Quraysh predominantly live in Makkah. Okay, so Makkah is here. Makkah. And, so for example, so let's say this is the Kaaba, right? And around the Kaaba, you have different clans that live on the side, okay? So, masalan, Shi'ab of Abi Talib is a valley of where Abu Talib's clan lives. So Bani Hashim, for example, live there, right? It's a valley and it's blocked by these mountains, so they cannot even escape. They'll be stuck. And around the Kaaba, you have different families living. So these are clans that live here. Now look at this. We know, for example, when we come to Canada, okay, most of us, our parents, for example, at least the youngsters, our parents immigrated to Canada, okay? They came with a, if they were not, illegal refugees or anything, illegal immigrants, they probably came on as a PR, permanent resident. I think that's probably the only way, or let's say the refugee status, for example. They come with some sort of documentation. Okay, they come with some sort of documentation. What does that documentation do for them once they land in Canada? It gives them some level of protection, some level of recognition that you are allowed to be on this land. But the rights that, let's say, the PR citizen or a refugee gets are not the same as the Canadian citizen. That's why everybody is trying to get that Canadian citizen, for example, citizenship, right? For example, you can vote. I don't know what else the differences are, but there is, if you want to call it, discrimination. I don't want to use the word discrimination here, but there are different set of rights for different levels of recognition. So citizenship is the greatest recognition. Once you are a citizen of Canada, you have a lot of rights. And because of that citizenship, you are protected. You are protected by the state. The state has a responsibility to give you protection, give you the benefits, and so on. Likewise, PR, let's say PR citizens, PR residents, right? They also have some rights. But now imagine you are actually an illegal immigrant, okay? Illegal immigrant, you're not going to have a fun time. You're always going to be on the run. You're always going to be trying to avoid getting caught. Why? Because if you get caught, the government has no duty to protect you. They will maybe deport you back. They will deport you, for example. Okay. The same thing is going to happen in Makkah. Same thing happens in Makkah. How does it happen in Makkah? Each clan, okay, if you are part of a clan, that is actually your citizenship. You should not enter Makkah if you are not part of a clan. There are some ways you can enter Makkah, I will explain, where you will be protected. If you do not have these conventions that they follow, if you do not abide by these conventions, you could possibly get in trouble in Makkah. And that's why you hear these stories sometimes where somebody came into Makkah, a business person came, or a traveler came, and they were able to oppress them, or they were able to kill them, okay? So if you are part of a clan, you're protected. if you are a slave, and a slave, you are sort of owned by one of the clan members, therefore you are protected. So the only reason you are protected as a slave in Mecca is because you are the property of someone. Okay? If you are a traveler, okay, if you are a traveler who was lost, you're not protected in Mecca. If you come into Mecca as a traveler, you're not protected. Okay? For example, Yasir, the father of Ammar Yasir. Yasir was a traveler, and they had captured him. They had arrested him once he entered Mecca. And he married Sumayya, who was actually also a slave. So they captured Yasir, they got him married to a slave, and that's why when the Muslims get persecuted, they are the first ones to be killed. They're not citizens. They're very easy to get rid of. But if you notice, the Muslims who are part of Bani Hashim, Bani Muttalib, all of these, they almost never get killed. For the next 13 years in Mecca, they will not get killed. There will be boycotts against them. There will be sanctions against them. They will be made fun of. They will, get harassed, assaulted, but they cannot kill them. Why? Because they believe in these conventions. They say, no, this is our tribe. Inshallah, when I talk about the migration in Abyssinia, we'll ask this question. Migration in Abyssinia, we say that Muslims were, under threat. That's why they escaped. But when you look at the list of the people who migrated, majority of them, or if not all of them, are actually from clans. You almost don't find any names of any of these individuals. Where's Bilal? There's no Bilal in Abyssinia. Bilal is still in Mecca. And many other people who were, travelers just people who were, lost or freed slaves who became Muslims, they actually remained in Mecca. So we're going to talk about why is that the case. So this is how the citizenship is working in Mecca. So if you are part of a clan, you're protected. If you are a slave who is owned by a clan member, you are safe. But if you are a traveler or you are a lost person who comes into Mecca, you could get in trouble. One of the ways that they would sort of safeguard themselves is by taking refuge near the Kaaba. That's one of the ways that they would try and take refuge. Kaaba was the place of refuge. Okay, so this is how this system is working. Okay. Reason why I have explained this system right now is because we're going to keep referring to this in some of our later lessons. So right now, I'm not going to go any more further on this in this lesson, but in next lessons, you will see I will keep referring to this. That look, this is why the Prophet is not being assassinated. The only time a real threat of assassination comes is after Hazrat Abu Talib passes away. Because Hazrat Abu Talib is the clan chief and he is the one giving protection to the Prophet. As soon as he passes away, the Prophet is now very, very at risk. As a matter of fact, they do try to assassinate him. Finally, after 10, 13 years, they finally can assassinate him because now he is not because the Prophet is not seen as part of a clan eventually. He's seen as a founder of a new movement, and as a matter of fact, he is the one trying to destroy all of these conventions. So now, after Abu Talib is gone, they can say, okay, we can kill this person. And then that is when the migration to Medina happens. Okay, so inshallah, we'll use this discussion later on, inshallah, in some of the later lessons. A third discussion I want to have over here, which is also pertaining to Jahiliyyah, is the idea of superstitions, or what they say in Arabic, khurafat. I think even in Urdu, maybe they say khurafat. Khurafat means superstitions. There's a discussion amongst the scholars that look, Islam came with a great, giving great importance to aql and also ilm. Okay, a lot of importance. The Quran is filled, ya'qilun, ta'qilun, why do you not contemplate? Why do you not think? Why do you not reflect? On the contrary, there is this discussion on something called khurafat or khurafa. Khurafa so the khurafa, the word khurafa itself is from a khurafa, I think. It's a story that was made up where apparently Aisha, wife of the Prophet, is narrating this story that there was a man by the name of Khurafa. His name himself was Khurafa, and he goes to this valley of jinns, and he comes back, and he comes and starts telling all of these stories. And in this hadith, which is a Sunni hadith, the Prophet is saying, yes, khurafa, he was right. So I mean, it's a fake hadith. Don't believe in the hadith. But I'm saying, so that's why I'm saying the narration of khurafa itself is a khurafa. But the word khurafa became famous in Arabia, meaning khurafa is like the tales that khurafa, the person from I don't know which tribe, he would tell these stories. These stories that don't have any justification, don't make any logical sense. What exactly is a khurafa? It is a belief. It is a belief that a person has, which does not have any logical justification, but it has an impact on the way a person thinks and on the way they live. This is what a khurafa is. For example, when you go to some of these Chinese condos, you will not find, floor number 7 or something. Okay, it's a belief that they have, and it impacts the way they live. Okay, so they will not put floor number 7. Now, this impact obviously can be sometimes very severe. Sometimes it can be a comedy. Like if you go to the elevator, you don't find 7. It's an impact. There's going into when the condo designers are designing it, they're like, don't put 7. This is like a serious thing for them. But you're just like, whatever. You just laugh it off. It doesn't really impact you. You don't feel like it's holding you back in progressing. It's preventing your perfection and so on. No, it's just there. So this is something that what a superstition is. Now, Muslim scholars, when Islam came and they began to discuss, when Islam began to spread to other parts of the world, in Persia, in Iraq, and all these different regions, you had a lot of new converts coming in. And slowly, they began to bring some of their own, ideas and beliefs and, superstitions. And they began to, reread some of the stories that they had heard, maybe even fabricate a lot of things. And eventually, there became a serious issue in the Muslim world of khurafat. Many sects or many groups, they began to have these very khurafat views. And Muslim scholars really began to address this. And you find some of the top scholars, Al-Jahiz, Abu Rihan Biruni, many big scholars, they began to discuss this. What is this? Why is this happening? And I'm going to link this back to the Arabian society because they also believe in this. There's a book, called Philosophy of Superstitions. It's in Farsi, by one of the philosophers in Qom. And he tries to analyze, why do religious people, because these are Muslims living in the Muslim world, why do people of religion end up, inclining towards khurafat? When religion is coming and teaching you something which is logical, and it is justified, and it is the truth, why do people go towards khurafat? He mentions a couple of reasons. I'll just quote a couple of them. He says, there is some shabahat, there is some resemblance between khurafat and religious truths which make people confused, and they end up falling for khurafat. For example, khurafat often relies on unnatural, like the khurafat itself, the superstition itself, assumes an unnatural sort of intervention. Okay, for example, if a black cat walks under the ladder, I don't even remember. I don't believe in this. So, if a black cat walks under the ladder or something, or if you walk under the ladder, something will happen to you. This assumes an unnatural intervention. There's no immediate cause and effect that you see, so you assume an unseen cause and effect. Religion also has a lot of unseen cause and effect. You cannot see half the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is working and intervening in the world. You cannot tell. So look, there's a shabahat over here. There's a resemblance. Okay. Number 2, khurafat attempt to fulfill some sort of spiritual or even material needs of humans. Okay. For example, if I'm scared to even give examples, but anyways, in case I say something that is like, we believe in this. Anyways, it tries to fulfill some sort of need. Many for example, in India, in Hindu culture, some of those, spiritual things that they do, where they don't eat for, weeks and weeks and weeks. I don't know how true that is. But, as a Muslim, you will say, this is khurafat. What is this? Why are you putting yourself through this spiritual refinement? Islam, we don't believe in this. That is a khurafa, but they are saying that no, it fulfills a spiritual need that we have. It fulfills a spiritual need. So religion also comes and offers you a spiritual fulfillment. So there is shabahat over here. Third thing that happens with khurafat is that many societies end up giving khurafat a type of sacredness. And once you give a khurafa a sacredness, then it is very difficult to critique it. It is very difficult to call it out. It's very difficult to say this is wrong, because it's a sacred thing. And people, when you violate sacred things, what happens? People will come up in arms and, destroy you. How dare you, for example, say this about our sacred ritual that we have? So Islam also comes up with sacred rituals. We also have sacred rituals, for example. If anybody critiques our sacred rituals, which we believe are true, we will behave the same way, actually. We behave the same way. So look, there are these things which are very, very similar. So of course, if somebody does not have the intellectual capacity, they will not be able to discern between what is a khurafa and what is the truth. But how does a khurafa differ from truth, from religion? This philosopher also mentions, by the way, I'm skipping a lot of these things, but I'll mention a couple of things he says. He says, look, a true, real religion is always going to be a rational, reasonable religion. And so by that definition, it will always be different than khurafa. And what this also means is that khurafat are not relative. They are not actually subjective. Because if something is true, rational, we don't believe that is relative and subjective. Rational truths are not relative. Okay, for me, this is rationally true, but for you, it may not be rationally true. No, it's rational means it's true for everyone. But if it is irrational, it could be relatively true for some people, because they're false and they're wrong. So religion is different from superstitions from this perspective. Religious beliefs are different. Number two, religious beliefs and true beliefs can actually be investigated. They can be investigated. They can be up for the test. In Islam, we say, you have any question? Come and ask us. We will tell you how we defend it. Khurafat, many of them, even the ones who are promoting the khurafat, they will say, no, this is not something that, don't ask questions about this. Don't ask questions about this. This is something that we have inherited from our ancestors. There's nothing to be questioned over here. And thirdly, religion leads people, religious truths lead people to perfection. They lead people to a real progress. They lead people to real spirituality. But khurafat actually do the complete opposite. They lead societies and they push them back, or they make them stagnant. And if any religious society gets impacted and affected by khurafat, superstitions, that is usually marking the end of the civilization. That is marking the end of the civilization. There is some research done, a lot of research done, that from 6th century Hijri onwards, up until the era of modernity, there had been a problem in the Islamic civilization where khurafat became very, very prominent. A lot of people have done research on this. Even Shia scholars have done research on this in Farsi, and as well as Western, everyone. There's a lot of research on this, and they blame certain ulama amongst the Ahl Sunnah who sort of seem to have pushed this vibe, and khurafat became very, very prominent, and that contributed at the very least to the fall of the civilization, because now the aql, the rationality, the reasonability is being replaced by these superstition khurafat that we have. Okay, now what causes these khurafat to stay in society and pushes people towards it? This scholar mentions, 30 plus reasons. I'll mention a couple of them. Number one reason, or one of the reasons he mentioned, is that look, the structure of a community and a society itself can be a cause for why people fall into superstitions. If the society, the faza of a society is closed, you're not allowed to speak, you're not allowed to think, you're not allowed to say anything, it's going to lead to khurafat very easily. Okay. Number two, the weakness of the culture of critical thinking. If a society does not have a culture of critical thinking, and they don't have, and instead what they have is a very strong culture of just transmitting. Our ancestors said this, our forefathers said this, and there's no culture of critical thinking, this is going to lead to superstitions in society. Okay. For example, a third reason, one of the reasons. This is an interesting one. Why do people go towards khurafat? Because abandoning khurafat requires a lot of effort. Imagine you're 30, 40, 50, 60, and you have a certain belief, and now somebody comes and tells you that, you know what, that's just khurafat, that wasn't even true. That is not easy. It's like, what, I have to go back to the drawing board and refigure out, like I spent my entire life doing this. That is not easy. It can, shake people. But this can also contribute in maintaining khurafat, unfortunately. Okay? Another one, this is a very good one. We do not feel a moral responsibility that we should be going towards going away from khurafat. This is an ethical issue. If you do not feel morally responsible for seeking the truth, that is an ethical issue. And if you do not feel morally responsible, you will be saying, no, it's okay. Whatever we have, it's all good. One other reason, which I have even given a lecture about this 2-3 times, which is that we have a poor system of dialogue within the communities. In a society, in a community where there are no etiquettes and no framework provided for dialogue, you will also contribute and push towards superstitions. Why? Because look, if somebody wants to come and point something out, there are no mechanisms put in place to be able to have a sincere, sensible dialogue with one another. Instead, what do you have? You have fighting and violence and aggression and swear words and cursing, and this is how we interact. I've written a couple of articles about this as well. That look, we do not have a culture of dialogue. We do not have a culture of dialogue. In the past, ulama were writing books on the ilm of munadarat, how to even have a discussion and a debate. We do have lost this, unfortunately. Okay? One final reason, or second last reason I'll mention is that look, ignorance itself. When a society becomes ignorant, they are not pushing ilm, they're not going towards knowledge, then obviously that will also contribute to superstitions. And the last one is that lack of importance given to the value of knowledge. We do not understand how important knowledge is. We do not understand the value of seeking knowledge. When, these are a couple of things that I've mentioned very quickly. Imagine all of these things combined in a society. Is that society going to go anywhere? It's not going to go anywhere. I'm sure most of the stuff I've mentioned, we can probably even relate that to ourselves and Muslims in general. Where are we headed? Now imagine these things, and we're saying that these things were prevalent in the Arabian society. Khurafat were highly prevalent in the Arabian society. And the Prophet ﷺ, and the Islam as a religion, and the Quran, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. They will come, Islam will come and try to eradicate this. Not just eradicate it by saying, remove this, but it will substitute it by providing principles, guidelines on how you can live your life. And if you follow these guidelines, even in future centuries, you will not fall for these superstitions. What was, one of the what would the superstition do in the Arabian society? Firstly, when the Prophet comes, a superstition prevents the truth from coming into society. Okay? They will not accept that something else could possibly be true, or that we could possibly be wrong. So it prevents. Okay? Secondly, what it does is that they will try their best to make their superstitions seem more authentic and more real than the actual truth. They will try their best. And inshallah, in the 4th or 5th lesson, I will describe how they were trying to do that. When they say the Prophet is mashura, he is afflicted with magic, he's majnoon, which I have argued that majnoon does not mean insane. It means possessed by the jinns. He is being assisted by the jinns. I will explain. They had these superstitions, and they would push these in their society and say, look, our superstitions, they wouldn't call them superstitions, our beliefs are the truth. Do not listen to this person who is claiming that he has some, connection with the angel. What does that mean? So they're trying to portray that as a superstition. Okay, this is how the mechanism works. The biggest superstition, obviously, the Arabians had was idol worship. And the idol worship, the type of idol some of these earlier historians have described, they say that, look, there were 3 types of idols. One type of idol was an idol that the clans used to worship. Okay, so the entire clan used to dedicate themselves to one idol. Then you had some type of idols that were dedicated to specific noblemen of, let's say, the Aus and the Khazraj. So from within these tribes and clans, the noble people of these clans, they had specific idols that they would also go to. And then you had smaller idols, smaller butts, that all these little, every family had one, for example, in their window or wherever, whatever they would place one, and they would devote themselves to it, they would worship it. This is khurafat. Let me quote an ayah, Surah 5, ayah 103. It's a very difficult ayah, because the ulama have tried to figure out what on earth do these animals mean. It says, ayah 103, مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ مِن بَحِيرَةٍ وَلَا سَائِبَةٍ وَلَا وَصِيلَةٍ وَلَا حَامٍ ولكن الذين كفروا يفترون على الله الكذب وأكثرهم لا يعقلون. Okay, remember the word. Allah has never ordained anything in religion called Bahira, Sa'iba, Wasila, Ham. If you look at the English translation, they don't even translate. They just keep it as Bahira, Sa'iba. Because what these are, there's an article on this also on my website. These were animals that they had some strange superstitions around. Okay, I don't even remember by heart right now. For example, they would say, wasila is a camel who has given, I'm making this up right now, but something along the lines that if a camel gives birth to 12 girls in a row, 12 female camels in a row, then this is something very sacred. You cannot touch it, you cannot sit on it, you cannot sleep on it, you cannot basically sleep on it on a howdaj it's called. You cannot do anything with it. You just leave it. It's a sacred camel. Or for example, a sa'iba. They will say sa'iba is a camel who gave birth to 7 boys in a row, 7 males in a row, and the 6th one was a female. This one, women cannot sit on this one. Women cannot, eat from this one, but the men can. Or for example, Bahira, a camel that, I don't know, gave birth to like 12, kids or something. Now this one, you just abandon it. Don't give it food, don't give it water, don't even touch it. It's a bad omen. It's a bad omen, so let it die on its own. These people would believe these are religious rituals. These are sacred. Do not question our sacred rituals. And they would say, Allah has given us these rules. Remember I mentioned they believed in Allah. They said, Allah, God has given us these rules. That's why Allah says, مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ مِن بَحِيرَةٍ. Allah has not given any such rule. وَلَكِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, those who disbelieve, يَفْتَرُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبِ. They are doing iftira. They are making a false accusation against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to justify their beliefs. Justify their beliefs and give it like a sacred touch. Okay? For example, another superstition. Surah 6, ayah 136 to ayah 138. وَجَعَلُوا لِلَّهِ مِمَّا ذَرَأَ مِنَ الْحَرْثِ وَالْأَنْعَامِ نَصِيبًا فَقَالُوا هذا لله بزعمهم وهذا لشركائنا فما كان لشركائهم فلا يصل إلى الله وما كان لله فهو يصل إلى شركائهم ساء ما يحكمون. It's a very, almost like a funny ayah. It says, the mushrikeen set aside a share of food for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, share of their crops and cattle. So they take the food, they put some for Allah. They say, هذا لله. This is for Allah. And then they say, هذا لشركائنا. These are for the idols. These are for the idols. Allah says the portion that they give for their for Allah is not given to Allah. It's also given to their shuraka. And the one that is given for their shuraka is not given to Allah. It is also given to them. Meaning they themselves eat it. But they have this superstition that look, no, we have dedicated this for Allah and this is for the shuraka, the idols. Allah is saying at the end, nothing is actually coming to me. You're the ones all eating this. Whoever is controlling the idols behind the scenes, they are the ones eating this. Okay? Or for example, they would have this superstition in ayah 138. وَقَالُوا هَذِهِ أَنْعَامٌ وَحَرْثٌ حِجْرٌ لَا يَطْعَمُهَا إِلَّا مَنْ نَشَاءُ بِزَعْمِهِمْ وَأَنْعَامٌ حُرِّمَتْ ظُهُورُهَا وَأَنْعَامٌ لَا يَذْكُرُونَ اسْمَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهَا افتراء عَلَيْهِ سَيَجْزِيهِمْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَفْتَرُونَ. They say, these cattle and crops are reserved. No one is allowed to eat from them except who we permit. Allah is saying this is what they are claiming. They are saying Allah has given us this ruling. God has given us these rulings. Some other cattle are exempted from labor and others are not slaughtered, all in Allah's name. Falsely attributing lies to Allah. Allah says He will repay them. He will give them a punishment for these lies. They are making up things, guys. They're literally making up stuff. They're saying, yeah, God told us this. God is telling us this. Allah is coming in the Quran. So look, how prevalent would this have had to have been for ayat to have been revealed? It must have been very prevalent. This is something that they must have been pushing. And these are, I think, Madani surahs as well. Still, they had these ideas. Allah is negating these. For example, they had another funny superstition. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ وَلَيْسَ الْبِرُّ بِأَنْ تَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهَا وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنِ اتَّقَى وَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. They had this custom. When they would come back from Hajj, the mushrikeen, when they would come back from Hajj, and now they have done the Hajj and everything, they would not enter the house from the front entrance. They would come from the back. Some of the stories say they would try to climb the walls and jump into the thing. Why? They would say this is a bir. This is a good thing to do. Out of respect. We just came back from Hajj, and out of respect, we should not enter from the front. You're gonna question why? I don't know. Nobody knows. If there was a why, maybe it would have been justified. But there's no why here. There's no cause. There's illogical. But it is so common that Allah is mentioning an ayah about this. He is saying, look, righteousness, bir, is not in entering your houses from the back door. What kind of definition are you giving for righteousness? The criteria of righteousness and bir is not these little activities that you're doing. The righteousness is man ittaqa, who has God consciousness. And there are many ayat like this that's saying, look, taqwa is the criteria. Why do you guys keep shifting from taqwa to these petty things, these trivial things, coming from the back door, and this animal's over here, and this and this and that? I have given in one of the lectures at council as well, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Islam is always trying to give you prioritization of good and bad deeds. For example, there are good deeds. For example, salat is a good deed, it's wajib. But sometimes people do not do that, and then they do another good act, and we say, mashallah, this person is the best person on earth. But look, Islam is going to prioritize. For example, the example I gave, in one of the talks, I said, if a person goes for proposal, let's say they go to a proposal for somebody's house, and the boy is there with his father, and the boy is talking, and if the boy says, the father of the boy says to the father of the girl, my son is amazing, he's religious, he's this and that, he has a good job. Well, yeah, one little mistake he does is that he steals the petty cash every month from work. Okay, the father of the girl will say, iltimas dua, I don't want to give my daughter to a thief. We're saying, no, it's just petty cash. Saying, no, but it's theft. Okay, I don't care about all the good deeds. That means the person has identified the correct perception of theft. But if you say, same scenario, the father goes and the boy starts speaking, and he says, yes, I have a lot of connections, I'm very well connected, and you know what, that uncle in the community, he does this in his home, and this uncle in that community, he's like this one does this one says this. The father of the girl will say, mashallah, not only is he religious, he's so well connected, he knows everything about the community, he's so well versed. Instead of saying, Baba, he's doing ghiba, he's doing backbiting. And the riwayat are saying, ghiba ashaddu min az-zina, is worse than zina, because it causes social corruption, but we do not have the correct perception. We are taking it very lightly. Likewise here, the society is giving bir, the criteria of bir is coming from the back door. Allah is saying that's not the criteria. Taqwa is the criteria. Okay, so these are some of the ayat that they are saying, almost salah time. I will just mention, 1-2 more ayat here, and we'll wrap it up. They had, very famous ayah, Surah Baqarah, ayah 158. Inna Safa wal Marwa min sha'airillah. Safa and Marwa are from the symbols of Allah. Why? What do you mean? Why did Allah have to mention these two mountains? They had a superstition about these two mountains as well. They had a story. They had a story about a boy, Is'af and Na'ila. These were these two, Makkans, and they say that these two, Makkans, boy and a girl, they went into the Kaaba and they did a haram act inside the Kaaba, and they believed that Allah or God has turned these two, the boy and the girl, into statues. And they actually had two statues, one on Safa, one on Marwa. And they said these are two mountains which are bad omen. Do not go near these two mountains. Okay? So in the Hajj time, were they doing sa'i? They were probably not doing sa'i. As a matter of fact, in the Hajj time, they were not even going to Arafat. They had abandoned these rituals. Allah mentioned in the Quran. So likewise, they will not go to these mountains. So that means they have gotten rid of a ritual of the Hajj. For this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, look, these stories that you have made up, which are not true, and you have put these idols on these mountains, these are all superstitions. Inna Safa wal Marwa min sha'air Allah. These are from the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The entire Hajj is a symbol of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you are considering these two mountains, which are part of the ritual of Hajj, as bad omen? This is something that Allah calls out. I'll wrap it up. I know I have a minute left. I'll just quote the talbiyah, the labbaik Allahumma labbaik of the Quraysh, and see what type of superstition that they had. They would say, labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika lak, illa sharikun huwa laka, tamlikuhu wa ma malak. This was the talbiyah of the Quraysh. They would say, labbaik Allahumma labbaik, we are here for you, O Allah. Labbaik la sharika lak, you do not have any partner except, yeah, you do have one partner, yeah, but you own him. You own him and whatever he owns. So remember the chart I drew yesterday? That Allah is the Khaliq. Yeah, he owns him, but it's his partner. Labbaik la sharika lak illa sharikun huwa laka, is your partner, but you own him. Look how Islam will change this. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik. None of this illa sharik. Innal hamda wa ni'mata laka wal mulk la sharika laka labbaik. 2-3 times la sharika laka labbaik, la sharika laka labbaik, la sharika laka labbaik, wal hamd wa ni'ma laka. Islam is changing the dynamics, the language, the perception, the conventions. Inshallah, it's time for salat and we will engage in that. I hope that inshallah this series is making sense. Tomorrow we will talk about the birth of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa ali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, and we will go to the marriage with Lady Khadija inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Muhammad wa ali.